Olivia, hello, it's Noah and Clint here. How are you doing?
I'm good, guys. How are you? Finally, we speak.
It has finally happened. I'm so excited about it, especially it's the eve of Christmas Eve. It's the Christmas season, and we couldn't be more excited to have you on, Olivia. How have you been doing? I know it's a busy time for you. You literally fought through traffic to get to this interview, and it's happened. How have you been? How's it been going?
Ah, really well. Yeah, it is a busy time of year, but it's a wonderful time of year, and yeah, so I'm just waiting. I'm just filled with the Christmas spirit. What can I tell you?
That is lovely to hear. We are as well, of course. And it's funny because of all the things you've done, Olivia, and we'll definitely get into some of those things. Of all the things you've done, it's funny because I feel like that you could be recognized for one of very many things. Like I feel like there's a segment of people that would meet you on the streets and be just like come to you knowing that you're the voice from Clone Wars. There's people that would come up to you knowing that you're Kieran Arnold. There's people that would come up to you from Wayne's World. What is the thing that you would say that you most get recognized for on the streets?
Um, it's hard. That's an interesting question. Before I answer that question, I just want to interject. Did you know that I'm also the voice of Luminara in the new Skywalker film, which has
Right.
just been released? I mean, it's one of the many cameos, but that's pretty exciting to me, just because it just kind of came out of the blue. And so, after doing Clone Wars, I've always loved that character, and obviously, with television, characters can die off and then come back to life, especially in science fiction. In a science fiction genre, even in a kind of prime suspect drama, like a thriller, like the character of Law and Order actually reprised that role again after being killed. So it's happened before to me. But to answer your question, I don't know. It's a mishmash of different things. Funnily enough, there's people who just recently come up to me and recognize me from something that I just did, a movie that I just did that was on Lifetime, and so it really just depends. I suppose what mood people are in or what kind of fan they are. Wayne's World too, because I have glasses on and the kind of Wayne wig, and some, people
Yeah.
kind of, they do a double take and they're like, man, wait a minute, was she, is that possibly, could it be, but it's always a real joy when people do, because obviously that's such a, it's kind of a classic movie now, and it's just a movie that brings people a lot of joy, and it's just so darn silly, that and there's just so many great people in that movie. It's not unlike Greedy. It's just got this incredible ensemble cast. People who aren't with us anymore, like Phil Hartman and
Hmm.
Chris Farley.
Yes.
Yeah, I just Wonder Years, obviously, Law and Order. I think. Greedy, Conan the Destroyer, believe it or not, still. I don't know why, but that was a long time ago. So yeah, it's a funny one. It's some people kicking and screaming because they're independent indie fans and they love Noah Baumbach and they followed all his work, and so it really just depends. I think probably Wonder Years though and Law and Order out of the two, which is kind of an interesting. Which is cool for me because they're such completely different roles. One is the quintessential villainess, sociopath, and it's interesting that she's such a smartly well-written character. The one who keeps getting away with murder, literally, and obviously the Wonder Years, just because it's such a nostalgic show
Sure.
that still is touching hearts and affecting people in a really positive way. I think, generationally, that's something that really stands the test of time. I just get a real kick out of, obviously, I think artists get into this business because they feel they have something to say, and really believing that you have a specific voice. I mean, everyone has a unique voice, I think. So it's really a question of, putting your best foot forward with that, and really sticking to your guns through sometimes decades. It's a business where it's a people pleasing business, so you can have a lot of people saying, you should come across more this way, or I think you'd get a lot more work if you were more akin with this actor or that actor. And I think I've always felt that the people that stand the test of time and have longevity, in the industry, sometimes, they stand the test of time because, there's times where they aren't necessarily the fad that's happening in this particular year, but they keep going strong with, what separates them from the others. And eventually I feel like they will they'll get their turn and their day in the sun.
Absolutely. But let's go back a few years here, Olivia. You were writing and composing songs since you were 5 years old. Talk a little bit about your passion for music and how it came about that you sang a song, an acoustic version of Living on a Prayer with John Bon Jovi.
Yeah, that's another really seriously amazing opportunity that I got, and that was because of Patrick Leonard. And incidentally, a little bit of a luck of the draw. I mean, obviously he thought I was really right for it, and I was recording my album at the time, which he was producing, and they were auditioning all kinds of really amazing singers like Pink and Sheryl Crow, and
Wow.
Obviously people of notoriety whose voice could really go up against John Bon Jovi and kind of give him a run for his money. It's a role, if you will, of this this woman Gina, and so it's a story, that song Living on a Prayer, which everybody knows. So the second time around, the fact that it was an acoustic version, I think it's tricky because people are listening to the lyrics in a different way, and they're maybe putting the lights down low and just sort of going, okay, where's the depth in this song if it's not a rock ballad in a stadium, And lo and behold, Bon Jovi is such a great group that there is some real pathos to their sound and to the songs that they're writing. And so I think it's great that song got a chance to be seen in that light in an acoustic, more stripped down version, which the whole album was ultimately. Yeah. But yeah, he walked in. Patrick was playing. He was playing a vocal track of one of the songs on my album, and I think it might have been Undertow or something, or maybe I don't know, something where I had a kind of gravelly sound in my voice, which I tend to have in, depending on what key I'm in. And he was like, "Who's that?" And Patrick Leonard said, "Oh, this is Olivia Darber, this artist that I'm working with right now." And he's like, "Wow, she kind of sounds like me." Idea where he thought, "Hey, forget about all these other big names like Pink and Sheryl Crow and Christina Aguilera. How about this kind of undiscovered voice?" Because to me, it really resonates in terms of how I hear her sounding, and we've never really actually heard Gina sing before, but that's how Gina would sound, he was saying to Patrick, if she were to sing. And because the song's now going to become a duet, let's go with Olivia. So I was like, "Ah, yes, why not? Let's go with Olivia."
Well, it's tremendous. I'm a big fan of Bon Jovi. I've seen him live several times, and just having that connection is so cool. And Olivia, I tell you what, before we get into some Wonder Year stuff, I've got to take you back to the beginning here, because you started acting very early in life, and you were, your first role being in a major motion picture, of course, Conan the Destroyer. I didn't realize that you were only 14 years old at that point, which is, it speaks to your talent, definitely, but it also makes me feel horrible for being attracted to that princess character way later in life than I should have been. I've got to really go back and reassess some things now, knowing that you were that young when you did it. what was it like coming into that picture and, just kind of cutting your teeth with Arnold, so to speak?
Do I need to play therapist here with you for a second? Do we need to have a little word?
I mean,
that was a loaded question, because it was like partly I need you to ask it to me again.
I know. I still, the truth of it is, I was probably 6 or 7 when I first saw Conan the Destroyer. So I feel like, you're just, just a little bit older than me. I feel like that's okay.
Yeah.
But, as time went on, I'm like, my goodness, like, you talk about being recognized for that. And still to this day, people always talk about it because you just, you looked older than 14. I don't think a lot of people realize you were that young. I mean, what was it like? Kind of cutting your teeth in that movie. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think 14-year-old girls dress that provocatively. Well, maybe they do. I mean, now I don't know. Maybe when they're out of the house they do. But I mean, I think. What was it like? I mean, those. I developed. I was a tomboy till I was. Literally just until right before I turned 14. I mean, literally. I looked like a boy. I was flat up and down like a pancake, and something just happened. I woke up out of bed this morning and I couldn't see my feet. What can I tell you? So it was odd, and it's an odd age. But I got there, and clearly I was playing a virginal princess, and it was out. Conan is out of a comic strip book, so I think, they were looking for something very specific. I mean, obviously, I was very young and quite childlike in many ways, but I had developed, and I think they wanted to take advantage of the look to make her very feminine and kind of, in her goddess energy. And so the Italian wardrobe people, they were all Dino De Laurentiis and Raffaella De Laurentiis's, people that they use for all of the films that they'd done, and Red Sonja and the prior Conan movie. So yeah, I guess I was sort of more in awe that they could make all of these amazing outfits, within a week. They sort of did all of my measurements, and then the next thing I knew, I'd have another fitting, and they'd be almost there, and I'd be sort of wearing a kind of corset thing, and all of the measurements that they'd done on me were literally to the T. Just kind of, fitting every curve of my body. So much legendary stuff there, to take in at that age. I missed my friends, that's for sure, but I made a lot of new ones, so it was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And Olivia, I know you talked about this a little bit on Twitter back in May, but we recently lost the great Luke Perry. But I think it's important, that we celebrate his life. You had the chance to work with him on a couple of films. What was he like on and off set?
Very charismatic. He just exuded, just a light. And the thing I loved most about Luke is he was just a real guy. He was a real person, and I think that really transferred over on screen in a lot of the roles that he played, beginning on 90210 and him getting his start. But he was, really a country boy in a way. He was a real team player, even when we were moving from Barbados on the second movie that we did to Toronto, we had to get up super early and, literally leave the tropics to the freezing cold winter tundra of Toronto. Yeah. And, he'd be the one knocking on everybody's door going, "We got to shake a leg," and helping, almost like a porter to everyone. So that's kind of just in a nutshell how I can describe Luke. I mean, he and I were both so excited to work with Roger Moore on The Enemy, having grown up, with him. And Luke really was just one of these people who would get starstruck by people, which was so cool because he was such a big star in his own right.
Well, Olivia, as we get into the Wonder Years here, I mean, in 1988, you come on board to do this show that's a time period piece taking place in the late 60s. You are the sister, you are Karen Arnold in the Wonder Years, of course. Just kind of talk about how this role came about. I mean, nobody could have known what a hit this was going to be for ABC, but Fred Savage became obviously a huge star from this. Jason Hervey, working with guys like Jack Loria. I mean, you had a tremendous cast.
Dan
and
Loria.
Yes, amazing, right? So, how did
Yeah.
how did the role come to be for you? How did you get Karen Arnold?
I, look, so much of this business has to do with, it does have a lot to do with talent, but it has a lot to do with luck, almost more with luck, if I may be that honest. I think Karen Arnold came about because I'd done, well, in terms of the business side of it and getting in the room with the casting director, I'd done 2 Growing Pains episodes, and I was just talking to Dan Laurie about this the other day. We were two of the only people who had been cast on Growing Pains as 2 very different characters. So we'd done 2 episodes playing 2 very different characters, and so luckily Neil Mullins and Carol Black had gotten to see the diversity in terms of what we could do as actors, and so they had us in. They felt really confident that we would be right for those roles, and it was just a question of them getting us in a room, us doing the right job in front of casting, and then getting a call back, and then getting eventually to network, which we both did. I read that script. I sometimes read when I'm in a car, not when I'm driving, thank God, but I was with my boyfriend at the time, and so we were going down Laurel Canyon, and I couldn't put it down. It was just like I was saying to him, this is the best script. This is the best script, period, not even pilot. It's just the best script that I've ever read. And this is going to change the world. It's going to change lives. Like, I didn't go through the 60s, but like, I just feel like I can breathe this. I feel like I know this. And, my parents obviously were 60s folk. My dad being a famous musician and my mom being a model, but that was more like English Carnaby Street. It was more, the Beatles and all of that kind of stuff. It wasn't like, it wasn't, America 60s, but I had lived in Taos, New Mexico, so I'd actually grown up there from about 9 years old onward, and so there was still that riffraff of sort of Easy Rider and that bohemian sensibility, and, and the best part of Americana and America, I think is in the Southwest, for me anyway. It's got that 60s kind of just vibe and sort of philosophy, the way people think about things. And so I'd had that. So maybe that was what spurred and ignited this sense of understanding when I read the script. But more importantly, I just felt like, wow, being a youth at that time, reading that script, I really felt like I was ready to play her, to have that kind of dogmatic view upon things. I was a very opinionated, young woman, and I felt like, wow, this is going to give me the opportunity to really let it rip, and I just really get this character. It's not that she's, it's not that she's a mean person or bitchy. She's like Jane Fonda in the China Syndrome. Do you know what I mean? She has something to say. She's very opinionated because she's very anti-Vietnam, and she has very specific views about why she doesn't want to wear a bra. And yes, she's a hardcore feminist, and she just has views on everything. I think the way millennials do today, or those kids that stood up on the podiums after those horrible mass shootings that we just had last year. So it's that kind of frenzied fervor that I think can only come out when you're going through a revolution, or when you're about to go through one, where it's the youth angst that really has the voice, and they take the torch and they run with it. So it was that, and it was also that I found it just charming. I found the messages so strong, and I found that it was like, wow, if they're actually really going to get Stephen Wolf to play in this scene, or Joe Cocker, or the Beatles, and they're really going to get the rights, this is just going to be massive. It's going to speak to everyone. So yeah, they came about, and that way, from it, just being really appealing to me, and me going in and, getting these really long extensions down to my arse, just really going for it, like really taking the time to go in and dress right and morph myself into this, this teenager from the 60s who really meant business, and it was successful. I think I just trusted my instincts with the way I wanted to play her, and so I think it was really her spirit, that ultimately, which Neil Marlin and Carol Black paid me a very nice compliment. Just recently, we actually went to UCLA to speak to the film group, these young kids who are kind of very intrigued with film and television, and we were there specifically to speak about what it takes, what is the criteria required to make a Wonder Years again, Yeah. And so, we were sitting there pontificating and say, well, it's a little bit of that, a little bit of paprika and salt and pepper here and there. But, ultimately it's in the casting. It's in, like the family doesn't necessarily really need to look alike. Like, oh, yes, this one's got, blonde hair and it's the same highlights that this one has. It's really more, do you buy them as a family, and do they have chemistry? And when you get them all in a room, do they behave like a family, and do they like each other? And that was the thing. I think that's what happened when we all went and read for Network, is that Allie Mills and I just hit it off like a house on fire. She was going to come up to me and she'd be like, "Oh my God, are those really your breasts? I mean, Jesus,
Right.
Oh my God." You're really not wearing a bra. I can't believe it, And we did do the Burning Bras Gloria Steinem scene where I'm like, Mom, yes, I can leave the house like this. No, I don't need it. Why do I need some piece of material strapping down my breasts? I mean, that's completely anti-establishment. And let's just talk about the fact that you eat dead cow all the time, Yeah. And, so we ended up, after saying the lines that we were supposed to say, we ended up basically just improvising, and the network were just laughing hysterically, and they were like, yeah, these two, they're definitely mother and daughter. And the rest is history. Yeah, they didn't know I was English though until the first day that I showed up to set, and that was a bit of a shock to them. So I think it took them a couple of weeks to digest that pill, but yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned co-creators Carol Black and Neil Marlin's there. Now, this is interesting that they ended up growing disillusioned with Hollywood, and they kind of abruptly left the industry, which in turn left Bob Rush, who took over in season 2. I kind of want to get your thoughts on some of the differences in styles, perhaps, between them. And did you feel the direction of the show changed at all?
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that after the creators of a show leave, that it's going to change, to a certain degree. I think that just goes with the territory. But I think that Bob Brush had a really great handle on taking it that much further. Which was really great for us as actors, is they really kind of gave us a very strong footing and base and foundation to go and take it and run. One of my favorite episodes is actually, I think, the second episode, or maybe the first one after the pilot, which was My Father's Office, where they gave everybody kind of an opportunity to play different roles because, I think every little boy dreams about going to work with his father. And so it was beautiful and very special that I think that was kind of one of the earliest shows. I think I played Jack's secretary, and Jason played an office colleague of Jack's, and so Fred goes he goes in this sort of dream sequence to his father's office, and I just thought, wow, this is so cool. This is like, getting to be on Saturday Night Live. I mean, I get to play like a kooky secretary and wear a beehive, and Norma played something else. I mean, they did that in a similar episode, not similar in the storyline, but I think where Jack and Norma got to play cops, and this is again another kind of dream sequence where Kevin Arnold is kind of, he's sort of imagining things, or he's letting his mind kind of go into a place where I wonder what it would have been like if mom and dad, if I'd come home and mom and dad, were cops or something. And, so we really got to kind of act out the imagination.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because, I mean, obviously anyone that's watched the show knows that Karen is a free spirit. She's a bit rebellious. We find that out in the first episode when she basically tells her dad that she's going to be on birth control pills, and that goes over really well. But Karen
with the
really
steamroller, there's a train that goes. The sound effect of the train is just classic.
And that sets the scene. It sets the scene for what kind of Karen is and what her arc is going to be. But your arc really comes a few seasons later when you and David Schwimmer kind of are revealed as roommates, and now it's actually you're dating and you're living together in sin. And of course, Jack is not too happy about that. But what was it like?
Well, sorry, I just have to interject. My other favorite Jack moment is that he opens one of the drawers and discovers Karen's lingerie drawer, which clearly for the camera to kind of shoot it was like a transparent see-through drawer, right? Where you see like bras and pants. And I was like, first of all, what hippie chick wore lingerie in the 60s? But okay, I guess it's TV. We can go for that. At the very least, just to see Jack's nostrils flare. And I think there was like another train noise that went through his head again when he sees his little girls. It's like, that was a drawer I wish I hadn't opened. Just like a real honeymoon moment, right?
Well, the honeymooners. It was a frequent reaction for Jack anytime Karen was in an episode. But you wind up doing right. You fall in love with David Schwimmer after some he and hawing. You finally decide to go ahead and marry David Schwimmer. And what was it like working with him? This is obviously before before Friends, and he turns out to be a mega star. But what was it like working with him? And were you happy with Karen's arc of finally kind of moving on, becoming more responsible, settling down?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have to be, I mean, in all honesty, I was so lucky because they were so great with me. I initially got I got paid for all shows produced, which meant, whether I was in the show or not, I would, get paid. And what actor doesn't love that? But, because I was a young actor, and really just kind of starting out on my, I'd had some films behind me and what have you, but I was really, my main objective was to keep learning and growing and working as much as possible. And, there were amazing episodes where the focal point was Karen, and you kind of got to see what she did on her own free time or during her day, like when Kevin goes to the Hill and she asks him to go and get stuff out of her locker when she's playing hooky and what have you. But what I did, is I asked them intermittent with the shows that were being shot, if rather than pay me for all shows produced, if I could, go off and do a Hallmark film, or I did this really super cool cult movie called Spirit of 76, and this was all happening, while production was going on. So, she was still in the show, but it was really the kids, the little kids, Winnie, Paul, and Kevin, they were all in junior high. And so when they weren't going to use me, I'd just say, hey, do you guys mind if I go off and do, a little role in a movie here or that or there? And they'd say, sure, but, we can't pay you. we can't pay us. And I'd be like, that's fine. I just want to keep getting better at my craft and staying, just keeping it all moving. And so that was great for me to be able to do that, and for them to be able to be as lenient as they were to let me go and do other work. And I think work begets work. I mean, any actor will tell you that and confirm that. And I think it did make me better, and it did give me a chance to, keep spreading my wings and then come back and playing this role of Karen just made it more enticing to me, where, the arc specified by the question that you asked, kept just kind of getting sweeter. I think it got more specific. It was like, well, they would like when they'd use me, they'd really use me, and they had somewhere to go, because clearly every character on that show, everybody related to, either to Mom or to Winnie or Kevin, Wayne, Jack, Karen, and they were kind of very specific to that era, that what they were doing and what their arcs would have been. And so they had ideas for each character, years down the line. I think, aside from David Schwimmer, they had John Corbett, who was an amazing actor to have on the show, because he really is like a free spirit and just so relaxed. And we got to sing Blowing in the Wind together. And I remember going into Neil Marlin and Carol Black's office, and we had to get the chords down on that and play, and I ended up playing some guitar on the lawn. But I think that then we really spoke specifically about, other than the boyfriends, getting into some scenes with Karen and what she's like with the opposite sex, and what kind of she's pretty pig-headed like Jack, and what kind of long-term boyfriend, somebody that she would potentially eventually marry, would she be compatible with? Well, apparently David Schwimmer was the one that they came up with, and I'm so glad that they did, because he just has this wonderful quality. I remember Bob Brush telling me about him, and I was like, yeah, what's he like, and what kind of guy is he? And he said, well, he kind of reminds me of a Nicolas Cage. He's got this kind of puppy dog doe eyes, and he's kind of like a guy that every girl wants to kind of take home to their parents, and every guy wants to just kind of hang out with. And then so that's David for you, and you'll get to meet him this afternoon. It's very exciting. And I did meet him, and he was like, hello, with this kind of like slightly stuffy, nose, like sound, but it was just like adorable. It was almost like Gomer
Pyle
character. Not Gomer Pyle, but the character, who says, I killed a rabbit. He kind of has like
Elmer Fudd.
Elmer Fudd. Yeah, exactly. He was like, hello, I'm David, and I'm like, hey, and I was like, just instant, I love this guy. And he'd always we'd do a scene, and he'd go, yeah, and how was that for you? Was that, did you like that? Was that, I would be like, yeah, it was great. Especially when we did the scene when we were out by the lawn, and it's raining, and he's camped out, and he pitches a tent, and that's where he really kind of wins over Jack Arnold's respect, you know, and mine, and I come out with a thing of coffee, and that's, I think, it's almost like Karen almost in a way pushes him. She tests him, she tests him to the point where. That's, I think, that was her just ultimate litmus test, because, she was planning on moving back home, and Wayne wasn't very happy about that, because he was going to he had been, sleeping in her room, and it was his room, and then she's just like, I'm back, and so that everything had to go back to the way it was. But then, they did end up, eloping, I guess, to Alaska, which, the thing about the show is it was full of surprises. Even the ending. I think, sort of half the country was sort of, disgruntled with it.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't necessarily feel that it had anything to do with what the show. It just was like, wow, that's a bit of a letdown, And then there's the other half of the country who sort of felt, well, it's not a show that can go on forever. I mean, it is the Wonder Years. It is through, a young boy's eyes who's eventually going to become a man. And I think as Fred, did, as he was becoming, a young man, I think it's just the story changed. The story sort of started to change. So I think they had to try. I think that ultimately, there's been many conversations about this, including the one that the cast had just recently when they came out with all the the DVD proper shows with all the music, the publishing that we've been waiting like 20 years to get, which is why they hadn't been syndicated before and what have you. Had to be done properly with a show like that. So we were all sitting around talking about it, and the general consensus was that I think the reason the show is timeless is because the show is about truth. I mean, comedy aside and melancholy aside, which the show very much had as well, I think it was a truth seeker of a show, and I think that was ultimately where the editors went with it, and the directors would go with it. Is this truthful? And so I think that went along with a lot of the arcs and what people did back at that time, and people do die. It was very sad that Jack got a heart attack. And did they need to give that information? Well, who knows? But, was it truthful? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and talking about Karen and Jack's relationship, I mean, delving into it a little bit, Karen was a rebellious flower child against the Vietnam War. On the other hand, Jack was a conservative Korean War veteran working for a military defense company in Norcom. So how would you describe the complicated relationship between Karen and Jack?
Well, first of all, you've got the components of them being father and daughter. So she had the capacity to push the gamut, push it to the limit, say things that nobody else would probably say at the table, because she knew she could. So there's that dynamic, and I think underneath that, they're two peas in a pod, really. I mean, they're very, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I think she's more like Jack than she was like Norma. But I must say, in Karen's favor, she had a tough exterior, a big false bravado. I think because she just had all of those opinions, and so there was a kind of, she's not going to let up on this whatsoever. But I think she was also deeply sensitive, which, Jack has a couple emotional scenes in the show over the years too, and it's just a question of kind of where things get them and what buttons get pushed in the right, in certain areas is what kind of makes them melt. But I think that, we're talking about, I mean, yes, their main opposition on the show, I think, topically was definitely about war. I think Jack, you find that out when it's, my 16th or 17th birthday party and he gives me the dog tags, his dog tags from Korea. And I think that's when, I've put up this big stink about, I don't want a birthday cake. It's just a party. And, Kevin's like, but Karen, I mean, they want to throw a party for you. And I'm like, it's just a party. Like, it's just a birthday. Like, what's the big deal? And I'm like, I'm going out, this thing of, and then he goes, not until I give you this. Jack says, and he puts this dog tag in my hand, and it just melts me, and it's just like all of the opinions and the opposition and the conflicting opinions that they've had, and the words spoken between them about war. She realizes at that point in time that yes, he's probably killed a couple of people, and he's probably carrying some stuff with him all the way up until now. You know, when he's there with his daughter at her 17th birthday, and she can't even, just sit down with the family and have a piece of cake. She's too busy wanting to go out and see the world and be with her friends. And so it's a real slowing down, bringing it right to the root of the matter, and really, this full circle. It's like this flood of emotions. Dan was a Marine, so in real life, so this was very close to his heart, and so I really felt that. And I think with anyone who's served for their country, whether you're for the war and you're pro it or against it, it's a real thing. And people don't make that stuff up. I mean, you get, when you get told you got to go, you've got to go, and it doesn't necessarily mean you want to go, but there's a whole other thing that says that you do. And he wouldn't have been one of those people who'd say, I'm going to go to Canada. He wouldn't have been. That was not in his character. It's a very different generation. So, I think. I think the interesting point, I think, behind all of this and what's great about the writing on that show is I think what it speaks volumes to me as an actor and as just a human being is, it doesn't matter whether you agree or not. At the end of the day, it's about connecting on a human spirit level, and all the other stuff just falls by the wayside. It's about, person to person respect. And I think she just has so much respect for her dad at that point in time, whether she agrees with him or not. It's a beautiful moment. And I think, the same with Jack. I think, there's a moment, I think, when he realizes that he's got to let his daughter go, I mean, there's the build-up a couple of shows prior to when he talks about, he always is going to leave the light on for his little girl. And then a few episodes after that is, when we get married and we, in the backyard up, somewhere, wherever my house and Schwimmer's house is. But, we have this amazing, hilarious, guru kind of Indian pastor who really sucks it to everybody between the eyes, and he was just such a brilliant actor. He was just like, you will take this girl and you will love her very much, and look at the karma around this wonderful mother, Norma. And Jack, but you've got a lot of anger, don't you? You've got to let that go. and so he does like a ritual, an aura around each character, and I think Karen's inability to actually come forth and tell her parents what's really going on, which that they're not going to be hanging around for very much longer after the wedding. They're actually getting in a van and driving, as far north as they can. I think that's just an example sometimes of, just being young and not being able to be as forthright with, though she has no problem with her opinions about the war or things she doesn't agree with, but I think she really doesn't want to hurt her parents, and she knows that it's going to break their hearts. Yeah. And her, I don't think she, what I came up with is Olivia playing that role. I was like, why wouldn't she just tell them? But then I thought, no, I think, would I want to tell parents that I'm going to be moving thousands of miles away and I'm probably going to see them once a year? It's a hard thing to the empty nest thing is hard on parents. You know, I know because I've had the same experience with my son. So it's, you know, it's a tough call. But did that answer your question? I feel like I went off on a real
no, it absolutely
whirlwind there.
Olivia, it's such a treat to be able to do this because getting this kind of insight is exactly, you know, what we were looking for. And you have been just so wonderful and generous. And I just, one last thing about the Wonder Years, and now, especially after talking to you in the last few questions, I know that you'll be able to set the record straight here and really help us out, because Noah and I, our whole lives, have sort of looked at the dynamic of Kevin and Winnie very differently now as adults than we did as children. Watching the show now, I feel like maybe the writers were a little uncertain about where to take things with their relationship. It was very on again, off again. I mean, as a kid, I just assumed Kevin and Winnie, they have to be together. This is great. And now looking back, maybe I understand now that the dynamic is more realistic, and it was a realistic portrayal of relationships that we all have. We all have a first love. Maybe they don't love us the same way. What was your opinion of the Kevin and Winnie dynamic in the show?
I mean, gosh, it's a very good question, and I mean, I know I'm really on the fence about it still to this day,
right.
Because
me too.
They look so cute together. Those two. They look a lot like brother and sister too, I think. And they have just innately, as Danica and Fred, you know, they have such great chemistry. So that really transpired on screen, translated on screen. And I think, you know, timing is everything. Like I was saying, luck in this business, you know, talent, love, yes, all very important. Timing and luck, are they more? Do they override the love and the, you know, the talent? You know, it's who knows? I mean, sometimes they do. So love should be enough in a perfect world, but sometimes it's not. And then timing, you know, where people are in their lives, and obviously at that age, you're going off to school, something happens, maybe someone gets pregnant, you know, who knows, you know, then your whole life has changed. So in that, I think, again, that was a truth call. That was a truth factor call, you know, like the ending of the show. It did, I think, for the most part, compared to the seasons prior to, I think it was a little bit of a hairpin left than people were expecting. But then I think you just said it yourself so well, is in retrospect and over time, as one grows up, as those kids who were part of the show and watching the show as adults now, you know, we do see it a different way. And so, you know, again, that comes down to good writing and people who are in those seats of power, making those calls, who have the experience that maybe we didn't have at the time.
Well, Olivia, I tell you what, we just can't thank you enough for coming on and doing this with us. I'm actually on my way here tonight to see Star Wars Episode 9, so I'll be able to give you my review tomorrow and let you know how this went. But no big deal, Olivia. It's just going to make something $200 billion and be the biggest box. I'm sure it'll break box office records. No big deal. And of course, you're the voice of Luminara Unduli, and you have done that since the Clone Wars. Big movie for you. What before we let you go? What else? What else you got in production right now? What else can we be looking for you in?
Oh my gosh, a new album and a movie that I just did called Lost Girls, which is all about. It's about child trafficking, actually, and
wow.
I play a kind of middle class mother whose daughter gets taken. She comes back, but you know, a very career minded woman who I think ultimately, you know, it brings it there's a lot of truth factor in this movie. I think there's some brilliant performances, dramatic performances by all the actors in it. But yeah, I'll keep you guys posted about it and be doing the whole social media thing. But there's a very interesting article about it right now on Twitter that I posted. So that's coming up, and some other things that I'm not quite able to talk about just yet, but lots of good stuff coming up for 2020.
Awesome.
Yeah, and definitely catch a movie that I have on Lifetime right now called Madam of Purity Falls, which is really, really fun and kind of a dark comedy thriller.
Absolutely. I'm such a fan of all your work, Olivia. And I tell you what, on a personal level, this means so much to have done this, to have been so generous with your time. And it's a crazy time of year for you and for everyone, but this just means the world. And thank you so much for this. And we definitely hope we can catch up soon. And anytime you have anything you want to promote, especially this new movie, Lost Girls, Angie's Story, just let us know. We'll be glad to do it. And we just can't thank you enough. It's been a real treat.
Oh, yeah. And of course, my own podcast, which is technically called Every Friday with Dan and Olivia, but we are going to be changing the title to that in the new year. So yeah, we've done 150 shows, and it's a really great show that kind of covers all kinds of topics. We cover pretty much everything, but primarily pop culture, music, movies, and we get into great existentialistic conversations and have amazing guests, directors and writers and stuff like that. So yeah, that's another thing I want to plug.
Absolutely. I've got it right here. Subscribing on iTunes as we speak. That is great. Now, I mean, since you're also a podcast host, now I feel a little. I mean, you do a great job yourself.
You feel a little verklempt? You're like a podcast host.
Well, we don't have a lot of existential conversation here on this podcast. I feel a little. I hope we didn't let you down too much. I mean, we keep it pretty much to 80s and 90s movies and television. So I hope.
I think. Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. It's great to know exactly what you're in for with Dan Miles and I, who's my amazing a partner in crime on the podcast. We both and both musicians. So. And we can digress sometimes based on we'll get on one topic, and then based on who we're interviewing, or if it's just he and I, we do tend to go into the depth, whatever comes up. But yeah,
awesome.
Check it out, you'll love it.
Definitely going to. Olivia, thank you again. Merry Christmas to you and to everyone close to you. Have a great one, and we will catch up soon, my friend.
Happy holidays. Lots of love. Bye.
You too. Thank you.